Right, we are now recording. Welcome everyone to this webinar brought to you by HELIG um, on the new framework for information literacy. Shehaamah Mohamed is our presenter. She is the Senior Librarian for Information Literacy at UWC Library. Having accumulated 10 years of experience as a librarian, she now tries to nurture the understanding that information literacy is a socio-cultural practice. She is primarily responsible for facilitating the embedding of information literacy in teaching and learning. It is, she claims, and as we will hear, imperative that students understand the fundamentals of becoming information literate, as this will empower them for lifelong learning. As a means of initiating awareness and conversation about embedding information literacy in teaching and learning, Shehaamah has introduced the new ACRL-IL framework for higher education to all faculties at UWC. The library has also drafted guidelines which lay out revised ideas and a vision for developing students' practices in working with, using, repurposing, and sharing information in academic and professional settings. Shehaamah received her Bachelor of Arts and Library Science and LLB and LLM degrees at UWC. Right, so I'm going to hand over to Shehaamah. I'm going to mute my mic. If you have any comments and questions, please put them in the chat.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, for this, for that introduction, and thank you so much for this valuable opportunity. And welcome to all our fellow librarians and also to those who are affiliated with teaching and learning. I hope that everybody can hear me clearly. I must say that I feel very privileged to be able to represent UWC Library today, and also for being given a space to share our ideas about information literacy and the recent developments in the field. So I realize that I've been allocated limited time for this webinar, so I'd like to start immediately, if I may. And again, I hope that I'm audible enough. Ingrid, I don't see the slides. Have you uploaded them? Okay, so they're still loading.
Shehaamah, do you see the slides?
Okay, thank you. I see them now. All right. So welcome again to everybody. Firstly, before I start the discussion, I'd like to propose that you consider these issues as possible questions that may arise during the session, so that at the end of my presentation, you could post a question or two related to any of these themes. So I'll leave the slide up just for the few seconds for you to peruse while I continue the discussion. I must say that up until now, UWC Library has been offering library instruction to students to navigate the set of library tools and resources, and I'm sure this is the case with all other academic libraries. Now, unfortunately, the practice of library instruction has been largely conflated by many with information literacy, because I'm sure that we all understand that fundamentally information literacy is much broader than being able to find information. I think in essence, it's ideal that we would like our students to know what forms of information and evidence are valued. And we'd also like them to be able to engage with the discourse in their discipline so that they would be able to think and behave as expert practitioners do. And for me, this webinar is therefore significantly about discussing the ways in which we can enhance these proficiencies in students and ways in which we can develop them as information literate individuals. And for these reasons, UWC Library believes very strongly that the ideas that are represented in this new ACRL framework for information literacy in higher education should form part of learning activities within the curriculum. In other words, they should be embedded in teaching practices, in teaching and learning. So the library has drafted a set of guidelines for embedding information literacy in teaching and learning. And for us, this means that we have positioned ourselves with a statement of our beliefs in relation to information literacy and the ideas that we have about how they may be infused within teaching practices. I think it goes without saying that information is a raw material. It's a raw material that changes the way that one learns. It changes the way you think. It has the power to change your ideas. And that is why we say that information literacy is a learning literacy. And such a learning literacy is particularly valuable within this current dynamic information ecosystem that we find ourselves in today. Because this environment transforms possibilities for meaning making. We believe that information literacy repositions individuals to shape their own learning. It repositions their way of thinking when it comes to meaning making. And I think we can attribute this to the emancipatory value of any literacy. So we also say that information literacy is an overarching literacy that encompasses all other literacies, which includes academic literacy. So the library produced the set of guidelines essentially to introduce these 6 information literacy frames that I'll be talking to during the course of this presentation. We do believe that these frames will equip our learners with a better understanding of what it means to become information literate and also with a better understanding of what it means to think, read, and write within their respective disciplinary communities. And lastly, I'd just like to say here that the experts on information literacy, amongst others, Anna Marie Lloyd, in her 2010 publications entitled Information Literacy Landscapes, posits that information literacy is a situated socio-cultural practice. And this means that we cannot become information literate without engaging with others, without interacting, without communicating. And even the scholarship on new literacy studies and multiliteracies maintain that literacies in themselves is a dialogical process. Even in the private actions of thinking, reading, and writing, there are always inner forms of speech taking place, where our ideas and our thoughts are transformed into language via writing. So we're always in communication, if not with ourselves, then with those around us, with our peers, with our colleagues, with academics, with practitioners in our disciplinary communities. I'd also just like to add that in the past, the printed text used to dominate, and it used to operate in an environment or in a context where only professional practitioners were allowed to share their ideas, they were allowed to publish. But nowadays, because of Web 2.0 application, we have, because of this new ecology, we have many different digital applications which allows us to search, read, interact online, visualize, record, and communicate with one another through multimodal means. And this means that there's a lot of space for our learners to explore, for responding, for creating, for challenging. There is space for agency, for independent and critical thinking, but yet they do need guidance. And in addition to Anna Marie Lloyd's finding that literacies are social and situated, the recently published research maintained that information literacy is also socio-material. And this simply means that as textual practices are transformed by emerging technologies and the new Web 2.0 ecology, these practices are reinterpreted by new understandings of literacy. For instance, in Ibrar Bhatt and Darouk's study on the socio-materiality of digital literacy events, especially Bhatt's doctoral thesis, which was submitted last year, where he investigated the socio-material aspect of assignment writing, they found that learners do much more than write on a screen at their desks. Their written work is undertaken alongside a host of interrelated behaviors, and this includes talking to one another, interacting with actors, human and non-human actors across different spatialities and temporalities, using the internet, using mobile devices. And these literary practices occur during assignment writing and therefore includes interaction with material objects as well. So having said this, we do believe that the 6 information literacy frames that were introduced in the new framework are open-ended, and they will ensure that there is scope for teaching and independent exploration and thinking. There is also ample evidence to suggest that a wide range of librarians are indeed embracing aspects of the new framework and are actually running with it. For instance, Joy Swanson, who is a member of the ACRL task force, points out that the framework can enable us to get to real student learning because it can be adapted to align with our goals as teachers. And Megan Oakleaf has echoed that statement because she says librarians can use the framework as inspiration to focus on the actual concepts rather than exclusively on tools and techniques. And so has Townsend, Liu, Hofer, and Brunetti. They've defended the threshold concepts for being flexible and versatile, and while still being rooted in common problem areas within the discipline. So I think that librarians who are interested in critical information literacy and critical pedagogy may be inspired by this framework. So let's look at the composition of each frame. Each information literacy frame is based on a cluster of interconnected elements. And firstly, we have the threshold concept, which I know is not an unfamiliar term to you, because threshold concepts are prevalent in all disciplines. They refer to those imaginary gateways or portals that students need to pass through in order to understand a concept better. And in terms of information literacy, these are the core understandings about information. And coupled with that, we have the knowledge practices that refer to the abilities and the proficiencies that students should attain throughout their academic careers. The ACRL has also added a set of dispositions which refer to a set of preferences or attitudes that the student will develop to start thinking and behaving and acting as expert practitioners do in their fields. So this refers to the ways of thinking and behavior. And the end product is a set of 6 information literacy frames or lenses through which one can view information literacy. So please note that I have not listed these frames in alphabetical order as they are presented in the new framework. They are in no particular order, just maybe according to my preference. So I'll start with scholarship as an ongoing conversation. And this frame implies that there is no single easy answer in scholarly research. We want our students to understand that when they do research, the information that they locate and use has come about as a result of different ideas that were formulated and debated and weighed against each other over extended periods of time. These ideas give rise to fresh insights and new discoveries. We want them to understand that knowledge is always contested. It's never fixed. It's always questioned. And this frame enables them and gives them an opportunity to become conversant with the discipline itself. So the conversation metaphor is useful, I think, in helping students to break out of those bad misconceptions, to steer them away from believing that that research looks something like this. It's not about jotting down or taking notes or considering the pros and cons, but rather they should be aware that it really is part of an ongoing roundtable discussion. I think that when one points out the similarities between conversations and scholarly communications to students, this could be a very good pedagogical tactic. But importantly, I think that we want our students to realize that research areas actually contain multiple perspectives. And it's a good thing to point that out to them. Many of these frames, as you may have noticed, are quite abstract, and I hope that the examples that I'll be using might, and the illustrations that I'll be showing you might sort of create a better understanding of what the ACRL task force tried to describe. So just by way of explanation that scholarship is a conversation, there are many examples, and I'm sure you can think of better examples. The mere fact, for example, that the universe is an orderly, harmonious system has been debated over many centuries by people like Galileo, Newton, more recently by Alpha and Kolb, who are advocates of the Big Bang Theory. Essentially, we want our students, when doing research, they should realize that changing paradigms within a field may be charted on a timeline. Another example, for instance, whether the question or the debate on whether institutionalization is the correct solution to the problem of mental illness. This debate has started in the year 705 AD in Baghdad, where they established the first psychiatric hospital, and Western Europe actually adopted these views later with the advances of physicians like Philippe Pinel in France and William Tuke in England, and even up until today, there isn't a unanimous agreement and acceptance that institutionalization is in fact the answer to mental illness. In fact, there's been many pieces of legislation that were promulgated over the centuries, repealed, and yet more statutes being developed along these lines or along this debate. And then, of course, another example could be economic equality and the role of the government in the capitalism versus socialism debate. This has been ongoing for many, many years. So coming back to our online scholarly platforms, these platforms such as blogs, Twitter, SlideShare, they expand the opportunities for students to engage with practitioners and experts in the discipline, and students can see themselves as being conversant within the discipline. It is important that students seek out these scholarly conversations on a topic and be able to contribute at an appropriate level. And I think this can be achieved through encouraging students to critically evaluate the contributions of others that they find online. These spaces include local online communities, guided discussions, research journals, presentations, conferences posters. This is an example of a conference poster that was designed by a community and health sciences student. And it's a way of sharing ideas across, as I said, across different platforms by participating and by contributing your own voice. And this is what the frame, according to our interpretation, is trying to convey. Now to continue, the second frame says that when we do research, it's a process of inquiry. It's an iterative process. It's an open-ended exploration and engagement with information. And the researcher constantly finds himself in an environment where he needs to rethink his original ideas and rework them, explore and test new concepts in the discipline. And students here need to be taught how to identify those unresolved issues and how to frame questions. And as they deepen their knowledge within this discipline, they will learn how to frame more complex questions. So the process includes also teaching them the various research methodologies that are applicable and relevant to the information need, and also how to apply different lines of inquiry. So in data collection, they would be able, or they should be able to decide what method of research to undertake. It requires them to communicate with different role players in community where they will learn how issues affect these individuals. So an example of an assignment where we can try to infuse this frame would be, for instance, where we ask dental students or dentistry students to analyze and explain or investigate the passion gap, which is the removal of the top 4 incisor teeth. This is so prevalent on the Cape Flats. Is this a cultural phenomenon? Is it a fashion statement? Or is it just the result of poor dental hygiene? And of course here, when they start analyzing this topic or this assignment, they'll realize that this information isn't necessarily found in journal articles or monographs. It will require them to conduct interviews with those particular individuals. So they need to be taught how to do open-ended questions, how to do surveys, how to conduct an observation. So this is an example of an assignment which encapsulates all the elements of research as inquiry. And the process, I think, of research entails going beyond the regurgitation of facts. Another example, for instance, could be where we could ask law students to conduct original research based on interviews and not just consulting precedent or case law in the library and consulting the latest legislation, but asking them to tackle an assignment that requires them to interview somebody who has been involved in a crime or in the criminal justice system. So again, here the students will be taught to learn new ways of investigating and doing research on an issue. They will value the possibility of discovering social worlds about which they might have known very little. And they may also use the opportunity to explore their own social milieu. Okay. To continue, the third frame says that when we assign a degree of trust to a text, it is often contextual or constructed. And this means that authority or credibility may be seen as that degree of trust that is assigned to an information source. And it depends entirely on why we need that information. So the external indicators here, or the markers of authority, which a novice learner might rely on, would be whether, asking questions on whether the articles are peer-reviewed, what are the credentials of the author, and depending on the information need, these markers of authority may be used flexibly. So authority is contextual, they say, in that the information need may help determine the level of authority that is required. Students are expected to ask questions that will determine the relevancy as well. So a simple example, again,